What's up, War Rapport family? It's your man, Ike Jones. We are back with another unique building report. Today, I have the honor of talking to Mr. Thom Gossom. He is an Auburn alum, one of the first, well, the first actually, African-American student athletes to graduate from the university, a part of the just a rich history that Auburn has. And I just wanted to come on and talk to him a little bit about his playing days at Auburn University, a little bit about what he's got going on in life, and then maybe get a couple of takes about the current state of Auburn athletics. So welcoming into the War Rapport Building Rapport series, Mr. Thom Gossom.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it. And the best of everything for you guys on your show.
Thank you so much. Well, I appreciate you taking a little time to talk with me today. As I said, you are a part of history at Auburn, and just really wanted to kind of go into a little bit of that history and some of the things from your playing time at Auburn. And we'll just start with the desegregation, right? So you were a part of the movement of the first African-American athletes to be on campus, and you walked on with the university, ended up getting a scholarship. So just kind of, I'm sure you've told this story hundreds of times in your life, but just talk to me a little bit, so our viewers who may not know, a little bit about your story of getting on as an athlete at Auburn University.
Well, I had a conversation earlier today. Back in those days, there was one NFL game on Sundays. And then there was the Bear Bryant show and the Suge Jordan show. And the Bear Bryant show and the Suge Jordan show were all white, of course. And so I grew up with the idea that I could change that. And when I was in the fourth grade, I told my daddy that I was going to go play for one of those teams because they didn't have any black players, and that wasn't fair.
Wow.
And so I was a big admirer of athletes like Muhammad Ali and Kurt Flood and Jim Brown and the guys who used their football or their athletic platform to make a change in society. And I wanted to be one of those kind of athletes.
Okay.
So I went to John Carroll High School in Birmingham, which is a great school. But we didn't have same school Pat Sullivan went to.
Right.
And when Pat graduated, a lot of the guys he played with who were really good athletes, they all left. And so we didn't have very much in terms of athletic talent at John Carroll when I came along. And so I didn't get any scholarship offers, not for sports. I did have some opportunities academic-wise that would have required me to go to the Northeast. But I decided I wanted to go to Auburn. And when I went to Auburn in what they call pre-college counseling. Now I think it's called War Eagle something or whatever. And I did the pre-college counseling thing. And when it was over that afternoon, I asked somebody where the athletic department was, and they told me. And I went over and I had told the lady I wanted to walk onto the football team. And she sent me to Coach Jones, who was the freshman coach. He welcomed me, told me I was welcome to walk on. And I did. That fall, had a good fall. Went out. The varsity coaches noticed me and asked me if I would come out in the spring. And I did. I went out in the spring. I had a great spring. Pat and those guys were very helpful to me. And that summer, about 10 months after I got there, they signed me to a full scholarship.
Awesome.
And so I was on scholarship for the remainder of my time.
And so you played wide receiver, right?
I did.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, in those days, it wasn't the, wide receiver or passing offenses that we had.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
You were a glorified, blocker out there for the most part during those times, right?
I had, when we threw it, they threw it to me. And
Okay.
whenever every pass I caught, probably for my whole career, was either a first down or a touchdown.
Hmm.
So when they did throw it to me, we made it count.
All right. Okay. Well, let's listen. That's what matters the most, taking advantage of
Yeah.
the opportunities. And that's kind of like a theme of, kind of where we want to go with this conversation is about taking advantage of opportunities that have been placed in front of you. And you seem to have, over a pattern of your career, and we're talking about collegiate and then post collegiate, had a knack for just taking advantage of the opportunities that have been placed in front of you. But you said something interesting about, or that struck me as interesting, is that, you were very young when you made up in your mind, this is something that I want to do. Right.
Mhm.
So just talk to me a little bit about kind of how that carryover happened in a time where it just wasn't a thing, right? Like you made up in
Mhm.
your mind before this was a thing. This is a thing I wanted to do. Where does that come from, or where do you kind of feel like that builds from within you?
If going back, there's a photo of all these black athletes: Bill Russell, Muhammad Ali, Kurt Flood, who changed Major League Baseball. Um, uh, um, Trying to think of some of the others, but all these guys had a platform and they used that platform to change sports. And growing up in Birmingham during the civil rights issue, um, which at the time I was relatively young to be doing the marches and so on and so forth. And so I decided that, hey, I can use this to make a difference. And I did. Matter of fact, I wore number 49 at Auburn because that was the number Bobby Mitchell wore. Bobby Mitchell was an incredible football player. And back then, you had what you called halfbacks,
Right.
uh, guys who ran and caught the ball. And I wanted to be like Bobby Mitchell.
Hmm.
Not just as an athlete, Bobby Mitchell, when the NFL integrated the Washington team, I think they're the Commanders now, whatever,
Right.
something like that.
Yes, Commanders.
They were the last team in the NFL to integrate.
Hmm.
Every team had integrated but Washington, and they refused to integrate. And so I think it was the president of the United States who made them integrate the team. They integrated the team, and the player they chose to be their first African American player was Bobby Mitchell.
Hmm.
Bobby Mitchell not only was a great player for them, he ended up working as an executive for them. Actually, from the time he stopped playing in the 60s, 70s, or whatever, until maybe a couple of years ago, he passed. But
Hmm.
he was still an executive with the team. And I took that as an example of something that I could do in life. Um, and so I showed up at Auburn. Nobody had heard of me. And my dad was a little skeptical because, this my dad told me, he said, well, they say that these guys are the best of the best. Can you play with them?
Hmm.
And I said, Dad, I can play with them,
Right.
and I don't know where that confidence came from, but I was fast, and I was had always been one of the best players when we played in the street and when we played in people's yards. I
Okay.
didn't play organized until I was in 11th grade.
Okay.
And so I had a ways to go, but everything worked out.
So, talk to me a little bit about like what was the environment like? Were there things that, were difficult for you in making that transition to playing collegiate sports? You said you didn't start until you were 11. So just outside of just the learning the game at a higher level, were there any things that kind of made it difficult for you to make that transition into getting on the field and ultimately, being a contributor?
Well, the hardest thing was the whole integration process.
Right.
Auburn integrated, they were forced to integrate.
Mm.
They were forced to integrate in 1964. through a court order.
Right.
They refused to integrate until they were ordered by the courts. Um, James Owens, who was the first African American football player, James said integration at Auburn was like being dropped behind enemy lines.
Hmm.
Um, there was a lot of. I had gone to John Carroll, and I was probably the first black athlete at John Carroll. But I got along great with everybody at John Carroll. Auburn was different. Um, there was this, I always, in my mind, when I look back, it's dark.
Hmm.
There's no sunshine. Um, there were very few black students. It was incredibly lonely. Um, but I enjoyed the football. And once I got the scholarship, it gave me a focus. And so I became a starter. My sophomore season, I started for 3 years. And the main thing was to keep my scholarship because I took the financial burden off of my family. And I wasn't going to let anybody take my job.
Hmm.
And so I had a good career. You know, we understood the situation. When I say we, I mean James Henry, who was first. He was a basketball player, and um, I there was it was. First of all, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid to be around a lot of white people. That didn't
Right.
bother me. Um, I wanted to. I knew what I wanted to do. My parents got to enjoy the games and so on and so forth. And we won a lot of games. I mean, we won for 3 years. We never lost a home game.
Hmm.
Um, we finished number 5, number 8, and number 9. 3 of the 4 years. We never had a losing season. So all that was positive. And when you're winning, like you say, they didn't throw me the ball a lot. When you're winning, you look past those things
Right.
because you're winning.
Right.
Um, we recognized that we weren't going to be all Americans because we weren't going to get the ball.
Hmm.
And, that was part of it. But we also recognized that what we were doing was more important uh, than being an All American. It was to make things possible for you and for the others who came behind us. And so
Yeah.
we were on a mission.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I absolutely appreciate the sacrifices that so many have done. But for me as a person who was able to attend Auburn University and now has a platform that's about Auburn sports, specifically you all who paved the way to integration in those athletic endeavors at Auburn. Definitely a huge debt of gratitude is owed by us. So definitely appreciate the perseverance that you had in those scenarios. But let's transition, I guess, from your time at Auburn to the thing that you hinted at, which was it allowed you to have a scholarship and afford you an opportunity to get an education that you parlayed into, an acting career and then now a career in communication. So let's talk about postgraduate and some of the things that you've done in your career. You've been on movies and TV shows, all that kind of thing. So let's talk about that portion of your life there. The post Auburn University Thom Gossom.
I went back to let me say this. Auburn, I recognized when I was at Auburn, I recognize not just Auburn, but collegiate sports in general, that they were using me. And so I understood I had to use them.
Right.
And
Right.
so when I left Auburn, if you're playing wide receiver and all the games were on the radio primarily, and some on television, then if we ran 65 offensive plays, pretty much every play was Gossom splits out to the right, Gossom splits to the left, Gossom goes in motion, so on. So my name would be called 65, 100 times a game.
Hmm.
That gave me a platform.
Okay.
And when I went back to Birmingham, uh, people knew my name.
Right.
And there weren't any Black alumni in Birmingham. There was one Black alumnus. Um, but I now had a way of marketing myself.
Mm.
So I took a job at South Central Bell,
South Central
and
Bell.
yeah, South Central Bell, Bell South, AT&T,
Right.
whichever one it was next.
Yeah.
And that gave me the business training that I wanted. Um, I ended up at a company called Bell South Services. My last 9, I stayed there for, well, I stayed with the whole company for 9 years. And then I left and went out on my own. And I knew I was going to do that. It was nothing against the company. It was nothing with it all against Auburn. When I left Auburn, I never went back for 18 years.
Hmm.
I
Wow.
had a lot to deal with.
Right.
And so in mid 80s, Dr. Muse, who was the president, came and asked me if I would be a part of a task force at the university
Hmm.
to change the university's image or to work on the image.
Right.
And so I ended up doing that. And by then I had started my own business. I wanted to work for myself. When I started my own business, there were a lot of things going on in Birmingham at the time. And I became the first Black at the quarterback club, the first Black in the Letterman's club, the first Black at the Rotary, the first Black this, first Black that, a lot of stuff that would help to move the community along. And
Right.
as I said, I had role models in and Bobby Mitchell and Jim Brown and Muhammad Ali and so on and so forth. And so I I started my business. I had people knew my name, people knew me. They I was able to start my business with 4 clients: Alabama Power, South Central Bell, uh, um, the Chamber of Commerce, and another one. So I had 4 credible clients who could who I didn't have to worry about paying me, and so I could start my business in the black. And somewhere along the way, one of the things when I was doing all these first things, and I was asked to do these things to help to move the community along,
Hmm.
um, they decided that there was no avenue in Birmingham for Blacks to work in theater.
Hmm.
And so they wanted that. And they asked me if I'd get involved in that. And so uh, I was single. Um, we had there was, they started this series of theater workshops, Town and Gown and UAB. And I went to the first workshop. It was on a Thursday night. And they always tell this story. But I walked in and there was a room full of pretty women. And I said, well, I'll be back next Thursday. And that was the start of my theater career.
Hey, listen, I'm not mad at that at all.
And I started doing theater, and I was pretty good at it. I had never done it before, but um, I started doing theater with my good friend Dr. Nixon, and I got a call one morning. I mean, we would do shows, My Children, My Africa, Fences, so on and so forth. And got a call one morning. This woman told me she was a casting director and that there was a guy in town to shoot a film, And he had come to one of my shows the night before, and he was impressed with me and wanted to know if I would agree if he wrote me a part in his film. And I said, of course. So that was my first film. We shot it at Tannehill State Park down below Birmingham, going
Right.
towards Tuscaloosa. Um, and nothing much came of it. But at the same time, I was able to get my friend, Dr. Nixon, who was a dentist and an actor, helped me get an agent in Atlanta. I got an agent in Atlanta, and I ended up getting on In the Heat of the Night with Carol O'Connor.
Right.
I got a recurring job on In the Heat of the Night. I was on there for about 6 years, and I lived in Hoover, and I lived in my house in Birmingham, and I was on the #2 show in the country.
Hmm.
And so it's hard to beat. And it's like, wow, this is pretty easy. I should keep doing this. Well, when the Heat of the Night went away in the mid-90s, I did a show called Miss Evers Boys with Alfred Woodard and Lawrence Fishburne and so on and so forth. They were also impressed with me and told me I should be working in Los Angeles. My wife and I was married that by this time. My wife and I went to a premiere in Los Angeles of Miss Evers Boys. Believe it or not, when the show was over, this guy walked up to me and he said, "Man, you were great in that." I said, "Well, thank you." He said, "You don't live in Los Angeles?" I said, "No, I don't." And he said, "Would you like to work out of Los Angeles?" I said, "Well, everybody wants to work out of Los Angeles." He said, "Well, I'm with one of the top agencies in Los Angeles, and we'd like to represent you." And so the next day, I went over to the agency. They met all the agents. They wanted to represent me. And a couple of 3 weeks later, I started going back and forth to Los
Hmm.
Angeles from Birmingham. In between that, we moved to Florida, and I continued to go back and forth until 99. We got a place out there, and I stayed out there till about 2011.
Hmm.
Um, and had a good run, a really good career. I moved back around 2011, and I still have my agent in Atlanta, and I still do some. I've done a couple of shows this year, but I'm kind of on the retirement side of it now.
Okay. Kind of on the retirement side. Now, see, this is where, I connected with you through In the Heat of the Night because
Yeah,
listen, my parents used to watch that show all the time. And so we didn't have but one TV in the house, so it wasn't like I got to watch what I wanted to. So if my parents was watching it, that's what we were watching, was In the
there you
Heat of the
go.
Night.
There you
So
go.
definitely, that's the place where I connected with that story the most because it was just a part of my childhood coming up. Was In the Heat of the Night, we're gonna watch this show. My
Mhm.
dad is a big fan, so um, but yeah, it's amazing. Just kind of you know that stretch of time that you talked about, the 18 years of just not going back to Auburn because of a lot of what you had to experience and just needing a place to separate, but then being a part of um, you know, a lot of the firsts, as you mentioned. Just an amazing story about those things. I'm just out of curiosity. Have you had an opportunity to meet some of those people who you consider to be inspirations for you, the Alis of the world, or have you had an opportunity to?
I met Muhammad at Auburn.
Okay.
I've got a photo of Muhammad and I in the office here somewhere. I met him at Auburn. Um, and I'm trying to think of who else I may have met. Um, let me get back to that. But let me just say this: after Dr. Muse invited me back to Auburn, there have been a lot of people at Auburn who were really good to me.
Mhm.
Don Logan, who was the CEO at Time Warner. Don put me on the magazine advisory board. That
Mm.
was around 2000. And I have been involved with the university ever since then.
Right.
Um, I joined the university's foundation board in 2007, and that was a 2 4-year terms. My last couple of years, I was the chair of the board, and we were involved in the capital campaign. We raised $1 billion,
Hmm.
and that last 2 years, I was the face of that campaign. Went all over the country raising money for Auburn.
Right.
And so I didn't go back for 18 years, but when I got involved, I pretty much got involved heavily. Um, and even now, I mean, and then I worked for President Googe as a
Hmm.
consultant. And so it's been an incredible run.
Right.
Um, the medical school that's on campus was one of my projects
Okay.
that we brought to Auburn. The vapor wake dogs in the school of I can't think of the name of it, but vet medicine.
Okay.
That was one of my projects, and so I've been involved, and I'll just tell you guys this, and yeah, be happy if you will publicize it. But on October 26th and 27th, I'm doing a play at Auburn in the new
Okay.
Googe Center called Alabama Boys. And it's myself and Michael O'Neill, who
Hmm.
is an actor.
Right.
Um, and we're putting this play together. It's going to be a lot of fun. And so I've been involved. When I went back, it's like I never left again.
Right.
Um, so it's been an incredible journey, an incredible journey. I've met the people. You asked me about meeting people. Muhammad was the main one. Um, I met a lot of people in the acting world. I went to see this movie with Brad Pitt yesterday. I worked with Brad in Fight Club.
Okay.
Um, and of course we did Miss Evers Boys with Lawrence and Alfred and so on and so forth. So it's been a good run. I've enjoyed it. I've been able to spread the love to help other people,
Right.
um, people who have come along behind me. Let me say this too. There will be a book out probably in January about James Owens. I don't
Okay.
know the name of it. There's a film out about James Owens. If you'll give me your information, I'll be happy to send you a copy of it. I
Okay.
produced it, and
Okay.
um, I'd like to just spread his. And there's a book out about Henry Harris. And when I left the university as an athlete, one of my goals was to make sure that people knew who James and Henry were because they were phenomenal athletes who
Yeah.
gave their lives to the university.
Yeah.
And, you know, like I said, we weren't going to be. I remember when we played Texas in the Gator Bowl, my last game, we won.
Right.
And I was so pissed off because they wouldn't throw me the ball.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't have any trouble getting open.
Right.
You know, the coaches said they didn't have a passer that could get me the ball. And then I'd say, well, God damn it, go recruit one. You know? But let me say, and at the also that same week that we're doing the play, there's a reunion of the Amazons, this team I was on
Right.
called the Amazons. We finished number 5 in the country. We were amazing. And so we're having a reunion. You know, I'll be the only African American there
Hmm.
because James has passed. Um, Sometimes it still hurts
Hmm.
this many years later. Uh, Sometimes, it's tearful to talk about it, but I always come back with, I'm an actor. I cry for money, so uh, I can handle it. So
Yeah.
um,
Well, well,
it's
I
been a great
appreciate you
ride.
taking some time to share a lot of that story with me. One of the things, you talked a little bit about some of the stuff that you have going on right now.
Yeah,
And I want to transition here a little bit into, you are currently, doing broadcast communication stuff as well. So you have your own podcast slash YouTube channel that you're doing. Can we talk a little bit about that stuff that you've got
sure.
going on? Yeah.
It's
So,
called Tuesdays with Tom.
right.
And we had Rick Davis on today. Rick
Okay.
Davis played at Alabama.
Hmm.
He's a great guy. And um, Rick had a thing at the 16th Street Baptist Church in downtown Birmingham where the
Right.
bombings occurred.
Hmm.
Rick had nine. He brought the Sylvester Croom. He brought nine guys together. Four or five had played at Alabama as the first blacks, and me, James, Cedric from Auburn, and a couple of the coaches. And this was a while back, but it was an incredible moment because we talked about our experiences, how they were. Their experience at Alabama was different than ours. Bear was more welcoming. Uh,
Hmm.
Coach Jordan um, wasn't as welcoming, but I got along with Coach Jordan. You
Okay.
know, uh, as I said, I wasn't afraid of the whole thing. Um, the It was difficult to negotiate. I mean, you sit in a class. I remember we had a class. I had a film class, modes of film, and I had to sit, and we watched Birth of a Nation, and I had to sit in that classroom while they talked about these niggas and these niggas and those niggas, and that professor would look right at me every time he said it, and
Right.
I'd look right back at him and thought, what an asshole. Excuse me, but he and they honored him later. He
Huh.
had done a lot of good things in film, but I couldn't go there.
Yeah.
And there were there were some professors who were really welcoming, and then there were some who weren't.
Right.
Um, Dr. Overstreet was the only openly gay guy I knew,
Hmm.
and he was a professor in communication, and he taught uh, um, oral interpretation, a lot of poetry. I learned a lot about Langston Hughes and stuff from him. A good guy. I'm glad that I had him, and um, I admired him because he was openly gay in
Hmm.
the 1970s
Right.
at Auburn University. Um, so there were good things, and there were people. I went to John Carroll, and there were women at Auburn at the time who had gone to John Carroll, but we didn't have the same relationship we had had at John Carroll. It was a
Hmm.
different relationship. We couldn't be the kind of friendships that we had had. It was
Right.
a different world.
Yeah.
They didn't. You couldn't. I mean, there were probably. I think Henry had a white girlfriend, but it was always undercover.
Hmm.
It was always you couldn't. You didn't go on any dates. Let me put it that way.
Right. Right.
uh, um, but we made it through, and the Qs, the Omegas. There were a lot of things that started when we were there. The Omegas were started when we were there.
A friend of my dad's, Henry Ford, was an
Yeah,
Omega down. Yeah.
yeah, he was there.
Yeah.
He was at the thing. Well, the Omegas came about because one day we just got pissed off and we took off walking to the president's office, about a dozen of us. And so we had us a march on the president's office.
Hmm.
And he sat down with us, President Philpott, and we told him some of the things that were needed at the university to make life better for its Black students. That was in the spring of '71, and that next year, the Omegas were on campus.
Hmm.
And so things got a little better as they went. Um, yeah, who's your dad name? What's your dad's name?
Well, my dad's name is Harvey Jones. He had no affiliation with Auburn University, but
Okay,
Henry Ford
okay,
is a friend of his. So yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, well,
My
Ford
dad
and
was in the
I.
Marines. He was yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. So let me ask you a question. Why did you go to Auburn?
That's a great question. So, we talked a little bit about before we got on. I was an engineering major, and so Auburn was just one of the
Yeah.
better engineering schools in the state. And because my dad, Marine, GI Bill, in-state tuition was going to get waived for me. So, I had to
Oh,
take
good.
a pick of which engineering school I wanted to attend, and Auburn was the best fit for me at the time. And I
Hmm.
had always grown up watching Auburn football. So it's just like, I,
Hmm.
I like the Auburn football team. They've got a good engineering school. Great. Let's go down here and try to
There
see
you
to make
go.
it work.
There you
Yeah.
go. Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. What else you got?
Yeah, yeah. So the other thing that I wanted to kind of get into, if you would like to talk about it, is
Sure.
had you had an opportunity, now former athletic director Alan Green, did you have an opportunity to have any sort of relationship with Alan Green?
Unfortunately, I didn't.
Hmm,
Um, and I didn't want to go into all that. But personally, we just didn't have a relationship.
gotcha.
And I wish him the best.
Yeah.
You and that's about all I can say about that.
Not a problem, not a problem at all. So, but the last thing I really wanted to kind of get into or talk with you about was, do you still keep up with the team at all? Are you attending Auburn games? Or you have any thoughts about this current Auburn football coach and season? Any of those thoughts going on?
I keep up with it at a distance.
Gotcha.
When I was living in California, it was pretty difficult to go back and forth to games. When I got on the foundation board, I would go to a couple games a year. Um, I keep up with it. I've been invited. I spoke to the team when Gus was the coach.
Okay.
I've always been on the peripheral, and I've always been. I I taught in the athletic where the education part for the athletes. They when we were there, you didn't have tutors and so on and so forth. So they
Right.
have all that stuff. So I did that for several years uh, with the athletes and got to know a lot of the athletes through that. I know that and like I said, I spoke with him and Gus. I don't know Coach Harson. I wish him the best.
Hmm.
I think he's in a. You asked me about Allen.
Hmm.
Knowing Auburn the way I do and knowing the politics of it, and knowing the politics, particularly in athletics, when Leith came and President Leith, and we didn't have a good relationship, and I think that led to my not having a good relationship with Allen.
Hmm.
Um, but I had a great relationship with President Googe. I mean,
Okay.
I could call him up right now. We're that kind of relationship. And when he left, uh, Leith's he pretty much banned me from the university. I don't know what his issue was.
Hmm.
Um, but when Googe came back, I went back to work for him, not as an employee, but basically as a consultant and doing things. Um, uh, so I've taught in athletics. I speak to a class every year in the honors college. Um, and people are really interested in the story. Most of
Right.
the time, it's all white kids. I understand there'll be one black kid this fall
Hmm.
in the class, but I love talking to them because they love to hear the story. I can tell them I sat in the same classroom that you're sitting in, and this is what happened. This is where I was when the guy streaked down the concourse on
Concourse. Right.
Haley Center
Yeah.
on a Friday morning at 10 o'clock. Everybody was out there gathering, and here he comes with a ski mask and tennis shoes, and that's all he had on. And he was running, buddy. You could tell he
Yeah.
was scared. Um, so, I can go through a lot of those things, but I've had an incredible run at the university. Like I said, we'll do that play uh, in October, and we'll go from there. So, yeah, there were some things that if you guys get a chance to come to the play, a lot of them will be in the play.
Okay.
Uh, um, but I've also been able to deliver for the university. Uh, some things that move the university forward, move the university ahead.
Yeah.
I was offered to I had the opportunity to be on the board of trustees, but I basically declined, and because I was on
Mm.
the foundation board, and we had a we our goal when I got on the foundation board was to have $1 billion endowment. Our endowment at the time was about $600 million. And I'm proud to say that we're now at $1 billion.
That's awesome.
Um, so I think that, and I think it was what maybe a couple of years ago, the university awarded me with the Lifetime Achievement Award,
I did see
and
that. Yes, sir.
so that was big. That was big for my family,
That was
for my
2019,
son.
right?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
and so it's been an incredible ride. I want to do a film about it called The $1 Billion Man.
Hmm.
Um, when we made the public announcement that we were going to raise $1 billion, we did it at A Day, and we were on the field. I was on the field, and made the announcement that we were going to raise $1 billion. And the same field that I used to run up and down on, I was now making a commitment to raise $1 billion,
That's awesome.
and we did it. And I just think it's a pretty neat story in the long run.
Yes, sir. It's an amazing story. Just again, just thinking back to the young boy who had the foresight to say this is what I want to do, and then you fast forward years later, becoming someone who's helping to further the university that didn't embrace you initially, but help that university get into a better position. It's an awesome story to be able to have, and a really great one to be able for you to share with me and our listeners. And I appreciate you taking a little time to do that.
Well,
Um, Before
go
we get
ahead.
out of here, I just wanted to, you've talked about it a couple of times, just give you an opportunity to talk about where people can, like, is it going to be tickets for the play? Is it going to be free?
Yeah,
Like,
at the
talk to me a little.
Googe, the Googe, what do you call it? The Googe Performing Arts Center right there on
Okay.
campus. New
Hmm.
new Performing Arts Center on campus. Um, I tell you what, you can also contact us or at bestgirl.com,
Okay.
bestgurl,
Okay.
and or you could, I don't know, who'd you talk to, Emily, or
Emily. Yes.
Emily will know, and she'll be glad to get it for you. And I'd love to have you guys come.
Okay.
It's gonna be a lot of fun, and I keep saying this might be my last thing here at the university, but I always end up doing another thing.
Right.
So I'm getting close to doing my last thing. Let me put it that
Okay.
way.
All right. So we'll try to direct people to bestgirl.com to get a little bit more information about the play, and some other
I'll
things
have
that you got going on.
Emily. I'll have Emily get in touch with you and send you information.
Okay. Sounds wonderful. Sounds wonderful. I'll make sure we put that information here in the bottom of the video. Is there anything else that you wanted to say before we close out today?
It's always, I think, an honor to talk to a younger generation about what we did. I don't think we. I know we didn't do it for any praise.
Right.
Um, we did it because it was in front of us, and we needed to do it. Uh, those omegas I was telling you about, there were, I think there were like 13 of them that came back. Other than Henry Ford, um, they'd never been back to campus
Hmm.
in all those years. And so we are in the week that we're having the play. Um, there's a group of guys coming back. We're called the Forgotten Ones. We're calling them the guys who played sports at Auburn, who left and have never been back.
Hmm.
Um, guys like Harvey Glance, who did coach at Auburn. Harvey Glance was a world class track athlete. Gary Redding was a basketball player, got drafted by the Portland Trailblazers. Um, Albert Johnson played basketball. All these guys were there. They graduated, they left, and they've never been back.
Hmm.
The university has never reached out to them.
Wow.
And so we call them the Forgotten Ones. They are, when they came back a couple of years ago, they were so happy to be back. And we're going to try and make sure that they continue to come back because, when I was going through that self exile for 18 years, I finally realized, this is my university too.
Right.
This is mine,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm entitled to whatever the university has to offer. And that was
Absolutely.
when I started. And thanks to Dr. Muse, who came and asked me if I would be involved, and people like Don Logan, and as such. Um, so I'm happy to have done what I've done. Uh, it gives my son a lot of pride. And I won for about 5 years. There's a program in Birmingham called Better Basics, which
Mm-hmm.
is a program for young fourth, fifth, sixth graders. I would bring a busload of those kids to campus every year for about 5 years, and they just loved it. And um, so that was an honor to be able to bring those kids. And when Jay Jacobs was the athletic director, he allowed me. We would bring them through athletics and let them tour athletics, let them meet some of the athletes, so on and so forth. And so I've tried to give back, and I, I I don't go to the games as much simply because I've been to a lot of games in my
Right.
life, and
Right. I'm sure.
it's just when I was talking to Rick Davis, and he went to Alabama, and I said, "Do you go to the games?" He said, "Not as much." At some point, it just if we're playing somebody really good, if we're playing Mercer, that's
Right.
that's that's like playing Parker, you
Right.
know.
Right. Right.
So, but anyway,
Yeah.
I
Well,
appreciate it, man.
yeah, no, I listen, I appreciate you being generous with your time and taking a little out of your day to sit down and talk with me. It's been great to have the conversation. We will definitely get the word out about the play that you have coming up and look forward to possibly coming down there and checking that out as well. Um But yeah, so again, our audience is all Auburn fans, so this is a good story for us to be able to get out there, and I appreciate you taking a little time to talk with me.
And we will send you a copy of Walk On.
Okay.
You don't have one, huh?
I don't.
Shame on you.
I don't have a copy. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
I will sign one and send it to you, and I will also
A
send
signed
you
copy. Okay, I appreciate that.
you must be special. And I will send you a copy of James Owens' film. It's called Quiet Courage. And
Okay.
then you can publicize it on your show and maybe have some other people become interested in it.
I will definitely do that. I appreciate it very much. All right. Well, that is it, War Rapport family. We appreciate Mr. Thom Gossom, a transformative figure for Auburn University, taking a few moments of his day to sit and talk with us a little bit. We'll have a lot more of the information that we talked about for ways that you can check out the things that he has going on right down in the description here. So make sure you check that out, man. We are the War Rapport on all social media platforms, except for TikTok, where we are TW Rapport. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. That's it. That's all we got for you today. Until the next time, and as always, War Eagle.